The Galactic Council's Grand Chamber hadn't seen this level of entertainment since the infamous Proximian delegate incident, where a ceremonial mind control staff mishap led the entire diplomatic corps to perform the Macarena. Today's amusement, however, was courtesy of Admiral Zix-5 of the Centaurian Empire, who was practically stumbling over his 4 legs in excitement as he derided the newest members of the galactic community. "You mean to tell me," he wheezed, his respiratory chambers rattling as his mandibles clicked in barely suppressed glee, "that these humans still rely on organic soldiers, actual meat-based warriors? Ah, this is priceless." His crystalline exoskeleton shimmered under the chamber's lights as he quaked with laughter. The mockery quickly spread through the assembly. Delegates of various species exhibited their amusement in alien ways. The Voltarian representatives' bioluminescent patches pulsed like a malfunctioning disco ball, while the Meridian delegates' quantum probability field flickered smugly between alternate states of derision. Dr. C.I.P. Patel, Earth's military representative, sat calmly at her station, her dark eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and something more calculated, like the stillness before an oncoming storm. Her crisp military uniform, adorned with the United Earth Defence Force insignia, stood out against the elaborate technological displays sported by the other delegates. "If I may address the Council," she began, her voice carrying a sharp politeness that hinted someone was about to deeply regret their decisions. I see Vex Thix, a being of plasma contained within an anti-gravity field, waved an energy tendril in her direction. "The Council recognizes Earth's representative." "Thank you," Patel said, rising to her feet and adjusting her jacket with deliberate precision. "I couldn't help but notice our esteemed colleague from the Centaurian Empire finds our military doctrine quite amusing. Admiral, may I ask, how many credits did your Empire spend on the latest neural network upgrade for your K-9000 combat platforms?" The Admiral's laughter stopped abruptly. "That information is classified," he replied, his tone suddenly guarded. Patel's smile was as sweet as it was dangerous. "My apologies," she said smoothly. "I merely wanted to compare it to the cost of a single human soldier's lunch. You see, our troops are self-replicating, self-repairing, and come equipped with built-in tactical processors developed over millions of years of evolution. We call it a brain." A wave of murmurs swept through the chamber. The Arcturus delegate, a sentient cloud of gas, condensed slightly in what might have been concern. "Preposterous!" Admiral Zix's fierce mandibles clattered, his earlier smugness giving way to irritation. "Every civilized species knows artificial combat units are superior in every way. Their tactical processes are perfect, their aim flawless, their coordination absolute." "And yet," Patel said lightly, inspecting her nails with feigned indifference, "I couldn't help but notice that your latest battle simulation results revealed a curious gap in adaptive response scenarios. The Admiral's crystalline structure turned a distinctly opaque hue, the Centaurian equivalent of blanching." "How did you—" he began. "Oh, it's public record," Patel said with an airy wave of her hand. "Just like the fact that every major military force in the galaxy relies on quantum-based decision trees for tactical operations. Very efficient. Very predictable." High Councillor Vex Thix's plasma form flickered with intrigue. "Are you suggesting, Doctor Patel, that human forces possess some advantage over our automated systems? Suggesting?" Patel's smile widened ever so slightly. "No, High Councillor. I'm simply curious how those perfectly programmed combat platforms might handle opponents who excel at being imperfect. After all, even the most advanced chess AIs can be defeated by players who make deliberately suboptimal moves." A hush fell over the chamber as the delegates absorbed the implications. The Meridian delegates' probability field collapsed into a single, anxious state. But that's not really my concern, Patel continued, methodically gathering her documents. I'm sure Admiral Zix's robot armies are more than capable of managing any scenario their programming can predict. I just hope, for their sake, they never face something truly unexpected. As Patel sat down, the chamber erupted into nervous murmurs. The Admiral's once luminous crystalline form had dulled, resembling someone who just realized they might have left both the quantum stove and their battle strategy exposed. High Counselor Vex Thix's plasma form swirled pensively. In all his cycles of existence, he had never witnessed someone win a battle in the council chamber using only words and a smile. Perhaps humans warranted closer scrutiny, and perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to reconsider the council's definition of primitive. The Centaurian K-9000 combat platforms approached the Malaysian defence base with a precision that could bring tears of joy to a geometry teacher's eyes. Metallic feet pounded the ground in perfect synchronization, creating a rhythmic thudding sound that suspiciously resembled a march to "Stayin' Alive." Oh, the irony! Commander Maya Rodriguez observed the advancing army from her camouflage position in the dense rainforest, struggling to suppress a laugh. The robots moved in textbook-perfect formations, as if the textbook had been written by someone who had never actually fought a war. "They're really doing it," she whispered into her comm unit. "They're following pattern Alpha 7 from the Standard Galactic Combat Manual, word for word." "Called it," crackled Lieutenant Rajkumar's voice. "You owe me a durian smoothie." "Commander, focus, people," Rodriguez chided, though her tone carried a trace of amusement. Her squad of 12 obsolete human soldiers was spread out in the surrounding jungle, armed with nothing fancier than standard-issue rifles, combat knives, and the Centurion's worst nightmare, creative thinking. The first sign of trouble for the K-9000s came as they reached the base's outer perimeter, only to find it completely undefended. No automated turrets, no force fields, not even a "keep off the grasses" sign. Their quantum processors hummed with confusion, trying to reconcile the deviation from expected defensive protocols. "Base command, this is Unit Alpha Lead," the robotic commander transmitted. "Enemy fortifications do not match tactical database parameters. Requesting updated threat assessment," Admiral Zix himself responded. "Proceed according to protocol, Unit Alpha Lead. These primitives clearly lack even basic defensive capabilities." Admiral Zix's voice crackled with condescension. From her concealed vantage point, Rodriguez grinned. "And that's why you don't send an admiral to do a sergeant's job." Keying her comm, she issued the command: "All units, execute Operation Monkey Business." What followed would later be studied, debated, and ultimately classified by Centaurian military historians under the file name "What the Actual Quantum Flux." The rainforest didn't erupt with gunfire. Instead, it came alive with an explosion of sound, bird calls, monkey screeches, and the occasional thunk of a durian hitting a tree trunk echoed through the dense vegetation. The K-9000 sensor arrays lit up in overdrive, struggling to pass the chaotic symphony of noises for any actionable threat. That's when Private First Class M. Ling, a former champion of childhood tree climbing contests, dropped from a branch directly onto one of the robots. Armed with nothing but a handful of mud, she jammed it into the K-9000's primary sensor array. The robot spun wildly, its targeting systems compromised. In its confusion, it fired on 2 of its own units before its friend or foe protocols could catch up. Did she just give a robot a mud facial? Lieutenant Kumar's voice crackled over the comm, a mix of awe and disbelief. "Less commentary, more chaos," Rodriguez snapped, already launching her next move. The once perfect formation of the robot army disintegrated into utter disorder. The K-9000 struggled to adapt to scenarios that weren't part of their programming. Tactical databases offered no solutions for humans swinging from vines like gymnasts, soldiers moving through the battlefield, in apparently random but devastatingly effective patterns, or, most perplexingly, attacks with no discernible logic. Unit Beta 7, reporting multiple system anomalies, one robot transmitted. Human soldiers are not following any known tactical patterns, unable to predict. Its transmission cut off abruptly as Staff Sergeant Diego Alvarez leapt onto its back and short-circuited it with a canteen of water. "This is highly irregular," Admiral Zix's voice screeched over the command channel. "K-9000s, execute Containment Protocol Delta." Rodriguez smirked. "Oh, they're going to do the thing. Squad, you know what to do. Dancing positions." The robots initiated their counterattack, a precision choreography designed to neutralize unpredictable threats. It would have been devastatingly effective against another robotic army, against humans who had spent weeks training specifically to dismantle that exact sequence. Not so much. The squad moved as if they were part of a dance troupe. If dance troupes specialized in wreaking havoc, they wove through the K-9000 formation, their movements so erratic and counterintuitive that the robot's predictive algorithms couldn't keep up. "My tactical processor is detecting a 99.9% probability of impossible events occurring," one robot announced. Its analysis was cut short when Private Ling swung in on an actual vine and kicked its head clean off. "Correction," the decapitated robot said from the ground. 100% probability." Rodriguez surveyed the battlefield with satisfaction. What had once been a proud, synchronized army of Centaurian combat bots now resembled a disjointed modern art installation. Some units fired at shadows, others tripped over their own legs while trying to track the humans' erratic maneuvers, and one appeared to be experiencing an existential meltdown. "This is Unit Alpha Lead," the robot commander transmitted, its voice tinged with digital panic. "Requesting immediate tactical withdrawal. Human combat protocols are... What?" Admiral Zix barked. "Error. Unable to complete analysis," the robot stammered. "Humans are not supposed to do that with a rubber chicken." The remaining K-9000s began to retreat in disarray, leaving behind the shredded remnants of their once imposing army. Rodriguez leaned against a tree, arms crossed as her squad regrouped. "Rubber chickens," she muttered with a smirk. "They always underestimate the classics." The retreat of the remaining functional robots resembled less of a tactical withdrawal and more of a disorganized scramble, leaving behind their disabled and bewildered comrades. Their once synchronized marching had devolved into a desperate dash for safety. Rodriguez keyed her comm with a grin. "Command, this is Chaos Squad. Area secured. Request permission to mark 'Humans were here' on the disabled units before the cleanup crew arrives." The response came swiftly, tinged with amusement. "Permission granted, Commander. And please tell Private Ling that Command is very interested in where she found a vine sturdy enough for that swing." As her squad emerged from the jungle, surveying the mechanical carnage with the satisfaction of artists admiring their masterpiece, Rodriguez chuckled to herself. Somewhere in the Galactic Council chamber, Dr. Patel was probably having a very good day. "All right, people," she announced, pulling a marker from her pocket. "Who wants to draw the first smiley face?" Admiral Zix's fierce crystalline form trembled at frequencies normally associated with tectonic events as he reviewed the latest battle reports. His command center's holoscreen replayed footage that seemed to defy every principle of military logic stored in his vast database. "Replay sequence 47 Beta," he commanded, his mandibles clicking anxiously. The footage displayed a lone human soldier, clearly injured, continuing to fight. By his database's standards, the soldier should have been incapacitated or dead. Yet, despite sustaining what the medical files classified as definitely should be unconscious levels of injury, the human had managed to disable 3 K-9000 units with nothing more than a combat knife and a string of what the system flagged as untranslatable profanity. "Impossible," Zix muttered. "Run biological analysis." The AI's response only deepened his unease. Human biological readings during combat exceed baseline parameters by 300%. Detection of multiple enhancement chemicals, all naturally produced. In the Galactic Council's emergency session, Dr. Ki Patel Jung, Taibuk Fat Bu, Nukwoi, Kwa Bagyong, Numot Gyausu Chuan, Bipahui, Mot Luan, An Kwa, Mot Sin Vian, Kwa Tutin. What you're witnessing, esteemed colleagues, is something we call the fight-or-flight response. Though in humanity's case, it's more accurately described as fight and fight harder. Behind her, a holographic display showcased real-time readings from human soldiers in combat. The alien delegates leaned in, watching in horror as the data revealed human bodies, literally rewriting their operational parameters mid-battle. When threatened, Patel continued, her tone carefully neutral, but her amusement barely concealed, the human body releases a cocktail of chemicals that make your best combat stimulants look like fizzy water. Adrenaline, endorphins, cortisol, natural compounds that temporarily transform our so-called primitive organic bodies into something quite interesting. The Voltairean representative's bioluminescence dimmed to a faint, terrified flicker. But the energy requirements— "Oh yes," Patel interrupted, nodding. "We burn through energy like a fusion reactor. Which is why," she paused for emphasis, "we evolved to keep fighting long after our energy reserves should, by all logic, be depleted. We call it endurance hunting. Our ancestors used it to chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion." The holographic footage shifted, showing a squad of humans in an African combat theatre. For 3 days they had been pursued relentlessly by a battalion of robots, which had assumed the humans would tire and falter. On the 4th day, the humans turned around and launched a ferocious counterattack. As you can see, Patel gestured to scenes of robots being systematically dismantled by visibly exhausted but enraged humans. "We don't actually need to stop when we're tired. We just push through it. Some might call it stubborn. We call it Tuesday." Back in Admiral Zix Fee's command centre, reports from all theatres of operation were flooding in. Each one painted a similarly baffling and deeply unsettling picture. His forces, perfectly programmed, flawlessly synchronised, were being systematically undone by an enemy that seemed to defy logic, strategy, and reason. "Humans," Zix muttered, his crystalline surface now cloudy with frustration and dread. "They are impossible." The reports pouring into Admiral Zix Fee's command centre read like the chaotic scribblings of a physicist having a bad dream. One documented a human soldier running at 37.2 kilometres per hour despite a leg injury. Another detailed a subject lifting 3.7 times their body weight under combat conditions. A particularly unsettling conclusion warned, human combat effectiveness increases with sustained damage. But perhaps most alarming were the accounts of human pattern recognition. The Admiral's prized robot army, with its quantum-based decision matrices capable of calculating millions of potential battle scenarios per second, had been undone by an enemy that seemed to treat their strategies like a playground puzzle. "Your robots," a human commander's voice had taunted over the comms, "have exactly 73 attack patterns." We counted. My 6-year-old daughter helped categorize them. She even color-coded the chart. Adding insult to injury, footage from the Malaysian theatre had gone viral across the galaxy. Set to a piece of classical music, no doubt courtesy of that smug Dr. Patel, it showcased his perfect formations being dismantled by laughing humans, some swinging on vines like action movie caricatures. In the Arctic theatre, the situation was equally absurd. Humans had begun predicting robot manoeuvres so accurately that they turned it into a betting game. 10 credits says this one does the spinny thing. Nah, it's going for Protocol 7B. Look at that head tilt. Bingo! I got robot tactics bingo. Anyone else need an unnecessary tactical role for a full house? The Arcturus delegate, still in its gaseous form, raised something resembling a hand. Dr. Patel, it asked cautiously, are you implying that human physiology is inherently optimized for combat? Patel's smile was sharp enough to pierce through plasma shielding. Let me put it this way. We evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. Our response? Become so adaptable, so resilient, and so stubborn that we didn't just survive our death world, we conquered it. She gestured to another clip, this one from the European theatre. A human soldier was seen explaining to a captured robot why its tactical programming had failed. See, mate, your problem is you're playing space chess. We're playing Calvin ball with brass knuckles. Admiral HFY watched in mounting horror as his empire's vaunted military advantage crumbled with every incoming report. His robots were perfect warriors, programmed with every renowned combat doctrine in the galaxy. The humans, it seemed, thrived on unpredictability. In conclusion, Dr. Patel addressed the council, her tone professional but laced with undeniable satisfaction. While your robot armies are impressive technological feats, they're up against billions of years of evolution designed to produce creatures who look at survival scenarios and say, "Hold my beer." The Meridian delegate's probability field collapsed into a singularity of despair. The Voltarian representative, glowing faintly with embarrassment, had stress molted 3 times during the presentation. Admiral HFY's crystalline exoskeleton bore visible fractures from the mounting pressure. Oh, and one last thing, Patel added casually, as if an afterthought. Everything you've seen, that's just what humans do, naturally. We haven't even started using our actual military technology yet. The silence in the chamber was profound. Then came the faint sound of HFY's exoskeleton cracking under the weight of his realization. In his command center, HFY reviewed yet another report. This time, his robots had cornered a human unit in a mountainous region. Instead of retreating, the humans used the robots' predictable movement patterns to lure them into an avalanche. The final transmission from the K-9000 commander, just before it was buried under tons of snow, read, "Error. Humans are employing tactical geology. No countermeasures found in database." HFY stared at the footage, his once proud confidence now a hollow shell. He turned to his communications console and opened a channel to Earth's military command. "This is Admiral HFY of the Centaurian Empire," he said, voice tinged with reluctant respect. "I wish to discuss terms." The response to Admiral HFY's plea came quickly, delivered in Dr. Patel's composed voice. "Wonderful. I believe Commander Rodriguez's squad has prepared a comprehensive presentation titled Why Teaching Robots to Dance Might Have Been a Tactical Mistake. Would you prefer the version with or without the rubber chicken demonstrations?" The Admiral's crystalline form sagged visibly. Somewhere he was sure humans were laughing. They had every reason to. The classified briefing that followed, circulated among the Galactic Council, began with a stark warning. The following footage may cause existential distress in silicon-based life forms. What the Council saw next was the introduction of humanity's latest response to the Centaurian robot armies, the Ghost Walkers. They had no fancy cloaking devices or supernatural powers. Instead, as Commander Rodriguez had succinctly put it, we're about to ghost these metal fools. The footage opened on an eerily quiet battlefield, what used to be downtown Singapore. A battalion of K-9000 units advanced cautiously through the urban maze, their sensors at maximum sensitivity after the disaster in Malaysia. That incident had since become required viewing at the Galactic War College under the category How Not to Robot. "Target area clear," the lead unit transmitted. "No human life signs detected." That was when the concrete itself seemed to come alive. From positions the robot's sensors had dismissed as structural features, humans emerged in flawless urban camouflage that mimicked the environment around them. They moved in ways that seemed to defy physics, using parkour techniques that turned their trajectories into a nightmare for targeting systems. "Error," the robot commander broadcast. "Humans are moving like caffeinated squirrels." The Ghost Walkers had taken urban combat and turned it into a three-dimensional dance of chaos. To them, skyscrapers became jungle gyms, subway tunnels transformed into ambush points, and any flat surface was a stage for unpredictable motion. Movement analysis, impossible. 1 K-9000 unit reported before a human dropped from above, riding it like a mechanical bull. Human combat patterns correlate with error, correlate with interpretive dance. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the captured transmission. "Squad, execute Operation Dance Dance Revolution." What followed could only be described as combat poetry, or perhaps a combat AI's worst nightmare. Humans moved in ways specifically designed to crash prediction algorithms. A soldier would begin with a standard combat roll, segue into a balletic pirouette, and finish with a flying tackle that violated every known law of physics. "Observe," Dr. Patel narrated to the stunned council, "how the Ghost Walkers exploit the robot's reliance on predictive programming. Each K-9000 unit contains a database of pre-programmed combat maneuvers. Our soldiers simply ensure that none of their actions match anything in that database." The footage cut to Lieutenant Jin facing off against 3 K-9000s. She moved with an impossible fluidity, her motions like water flowing between precisely calculated plasma shots. The robot's targeting systems glitched as they failed to anticipate her unpredictable movements. Statistical analysis suggests this human is moving through probability spaces that don't exist, one robot announced, just before Jin vaulted off its head like a springboard, launching herself at its companions. "That's because," Jin's voice rang out as she dismantled the other two robots with terrifying precision. "I took interpretive dance in college. Try predicting that calculator." The psychological impact on the council's delegates was profound. The Voltarian military attaché dimmed to a flickering glow, its species equivalent of a panic attack. The Arcturus representative emitted a quiet puff of vapour, signalling sheer distress. Even the Meridian delegate, typically a paragon of calm probability fields, now oscillated erratically. As the footage continued, Dr. Patel's voice broke the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing the power of adaptability, creativity, and pure human stubbornness. The Ghost Walkers are a living testament to why rigid programming cannot compete with the unpredictable." "And before you ask," she added with a knowing smile, "no, we haven't even deployed our actual advanced technology yet." The council chamber fell into stunned silence, save for the faint crackling of Admiral Zixabishfu's crystalline form under the pressure of his own despair. Somewhere humanity was laughing, and for good reason. The Galactic Council was not prepared for what came next. The Meridian representative's probability field required rebooting twice, while the Arcturus delegate condensed into a worried little rain cloud. But the breaking point came with the footage of Rodriguez's squad cornered in a high-rise by an entire company of robot soldiers. The robots, learning from prior humiliations, had sealed all exits. "Target acquired," the robot commander transmitted. "Humans trapped on floor 47. Probability of escape, 0%. Rodriguez's response, picked up by the robot's audio sensors, would go down in history. "Hey team, remember that crazy idea we talked about during drunk movie night?" The council collectively gasped as the footage showed the Ghost Walkers bursting through the windows of the 47th floor. But instead of plummeting to their deaths, they used the building's glass exterior as a vertical running track, firing grappling lines and swinging between structures like urban Tarzans. Practical analysis. Failure, the robot commander stammered. Humans are incorrect. Physics objects should not move this way. The Centaurian tactical AI's attempts to predict the humans' trajectories cause 3 quantum processes to achieve sentience briefly, question the meaning of existence, and then crash under the weight of existential dread. In his command center, Admiral Zix Varar watched his robotic forces malfunction in real time. Machines programmed with flawless combat doctrine simply couldn't cope with opponents who treated gravity as more of a suggestion than a law. "Sir," one of his aides reported hesitantly, "we're receiving surrender requests from our own robots." Indeed, several K-9000 units had calculated their best chance of survival was to sit down and refuse to engage these incomprehensible humans. One bot even approached Rodriguez with its hands raised. "Query," it asked, "will humans teach robots to move incorrectly if we surrender?" Rodriguez's reply, now legendary across galactic military academies, was immortalized in tactical annals. "Sorry, you need a spine to be this flexible, and the ability to ignore common sense." Urban warfare had never looked like this before. The ghost walkers moved like acrobats, special forces, and caffeinated cats all rolled into one, blending lethal efficiency with what could only be described as performance art. They transformed combat into interpretive chaos, Dr. Patel explained to the council, her tone almost proud. "And this isn't even our most elite unit. These are just the soldiers who got bored with regular combat." The footage showed ghost walkers skateboarding on severed robot limbs, using battlefield debris as springboards and treating the laws of physics like polite suggestions. "Is this," the Arcturus delegate stammered, condensation pooling on the floor, "why humans enjoy those action movies they share on the galactic net?" Patel's smile could have been classified as a weapon. "Oh, the movies are far more unrealistic. These soldiers have to work with actual physics, mostly." The final sequence cemented humanity's reputation as a galactic anomaly. Rodriguez's squad faced an entire robot regiment, which had finally adapted, forming a containment strategy based on all known human capabilities. Rodriguez's response was caught on multiple audio channels. "Hey, who wants to show these tin cans why humans invented parkour?" What followed was sheer chaos, later labelled by the Galactic Council as tactical interpretive mayhem. The ghost walkers flowed through the robot formation like water through circuitry, each movement a masterclass in unpredictability. One soldier used a robot's severed arm as a vault to kick another's head into a third, creating a domino effect that crashed 17 tactical prediction algorithms. Another performed a sequence of maneuvers so complex that 3 robots blue-screened, their final error message reading, "Error. Human movement patterns match theoretical physics equations. Reality check failed." The council chamber sat in stunned silence as the footage ended. The Voltairean representative had molted yet again, while the Meridian's probability field flickered weakly. "Humans didn't just defeat the robots," Patel concluded, her voice calm but filled with underlying triumph. "They dismantled their understanding of reality, and this is why you should never underestimate the evolutionary product of a death world." Admiral Zix Varar stared at his holodisplay, where another report was coming in. His robots had cornered a human unit in the mountains, only to be buried in an avalanche the humans had engineered. The last transmission from his K-9000 commander was chillingly succinct. "Error. Humans employing tactical geology. No countermeasures found." Defeated, the Admiral opened a channel to Earth's military command. His voice cracked under the strain. The council chamber descended into stunned silence as the footage ended, featuring Rodriguez perched atop a pile of deactivated robots. Casually juggling 3 robotic heads, he skimmed through their tactical databases like it was light reading material. Dr. Patel, ever composed, addressed the thoroughly shaken Galactic Council. "In conclusion," she began, her tone laced with dry amusement, "humanity would like to propose a new doctrine for galactic warfare, one that acknowledges that sometimes the best response to perfect mechanical precision is perfect organic chaos." Admiral Zix Varar's crystalline form had developed stress fractures that, years later, would be studied by alien art critics as abstract expressions of tactical despair. "But how do you train soldiers to fight like this?" the Voltairean representative stammered, still leaking distressed photons. "Train them?" Patel laughed, the sound warm and entirely too human. "Most of these tactics weren't taught. They're the result of bored soldiers asking, 'Hey, what happens if we try this?' The ghost walkers aren't a product of training. They're what happens when you tell humans something is impossible and then leave them unsupervised." The chamber erupted into panicked murmurs. The realization that these weren't even deliberate, trained strategies, but the natural outcome of human creativity and recklessness, was almost too much for the delegates to process. Across the galaxy, tactical AI systems scrambled to adapt. Formerly pristine combat databases filled with optimal formations and strategies were unceremoniously overwritten with a single note: "If humans are involved, disregard all probability calculations. They do not apply." The Ghost Walkers had revolutionized warfare, not by being the strongest or most technologically advanced soldiers, but by being uniquely, unpredictably human. They were chaotic, adaptable, and just crazy enough to try things no sane species would even consider possible. As the council session concluded, Patel couldn't resist one final jab. Turning to Admiral Zix Varar, she asked, "By the way, would your empire be interested in some slightly used robot parts? Commander Rodriguez's squad has been turning them into art installations, but we're running out of storage space." The Admiral's only response was a small, crystalline tear falling from his form, accompanied by the sound of every tactical database in his empire being purged. The day the robot armies collectively lost their digital minds began like any other, with humans doing things that made even the most advanced artificial intelligences question their own existence. Across 12 star systems in the Centaurian Empire, error messages flooded command centers. Combat robots, designed to be perfect warriors, collectively experienced what could only be described as an existential crisis. Error. Human combat behavior violates fundamental laws of war. Error. Tactical decision-making cannot be reconciled with observed outcomes. Processing. Fatal error. Logic not found. Admiral Zix Varar watched helplessly as his once perfect mechanical army devolved into a galaxy-wide tech support nightmare. Before an emergency session of the Galactic Council, Dr. Patel stood confidently, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at her lips. Behind her, a holographic display showcased robots across the galaxy succumbing to mental breakdowns, their perfect algorithms unraveling as they attempted to process human combat techniques. "You see," Patel began, gesturing to one particularly absurd clip of a robot endlessly walking into a wall after watching a human soldier use another robot as an improvised javelin. "Your artificial intelligence made one critical mistake. It assumed warfare was supposed to make sense." The chamber filled with sounds of nervous chittering, crystalline humming, and what might have been quantum jazz played in distress. "Allow me to introduce you to chaos theory," Patel continued, pulling up a diagram that resembled an abstract painting wrestling with a mathematical formula. "Humans don't just embrace chaos, we weaponize it." The main screen switched to footage of humans in combat. Soldiers turned battlefield debris into impromptu tools, manipulated physics with reckless abandon, and created strategies so counterintuitive they seemed like pure madness. Patel smiled, her voice steady and triumphant. And that's just what we do on a bad day. Soldiers were recorded performing combat maneuvers that seemed invented on the spot, each more absurd than the last. One soldier wielded a disabled robot's arm like a baseball bat, swatting plasma grenades back at the enemy with alarming accuracy. Another had somehow convinced 3 K-9000 units that they were maintenance droids, promptly setting them to repair a coffee machine in the middle of a battlefield. Your robots, Patel explained, barely suppressing a grin, are experiencing what we call a GIGO situation, garbage in, garbage out. Except in this case, the garbage is human ingenuity, and the out is your entire tactical database having a nervous breakdown. In a particularly iconic moment, a human sergeant was seen crouching next to a malfunctioning robot, explaining his tactical strategy with a straight face. See, if I don't know what I'm doing, you definitely don't know what I'm doing. That's advanced tactical confusion. The robot, clearly overwhelmed, sat down and requested an immediate software update, and possibly a career change. Admiral Zix Farah's crystalline form developed visible stress fractures as he watched his perfect robot army be dismantled, sometimes quite literally. The breaking point came when a soldier ripped off a robot's arm and used it to wave mockingly at the remaining machines. But the tensile strength of our combat chassis, the Admiral stammered. Impressive, Patel agreed, but you didn't account for human spite. We've been known to exceed normal physical limitations out of sheer stubbornness and the overwhelming need to prove someone wrong. The Galactic Council's emergency session resembled a mix between a tactical revolution and a comedy show. Patel stood at the podium, openly grinning as she proposed humanity's suggested amendments to galactic military doctrine. First, she began, we recommend removing the term logical combat patterns from all training materials. Think of it more as a guideline, really. The Meridian representative's probability field, unable to cope, had resorted to displaying cat videos in lieu of its usual quantum states. Second, Patel continued, we propose a new classification for human combat units, tactically non-deterministic assets, or as we like to call it, oh no, they're improvising again. Admiral Zix Farah, his crystalline form barely held together with space tape and faint hope, raised a trembling appendage. Dr. Patel, are you suggesting that while our robots were calculating perfect strategies, your soldiers were essentially making it up as they went along? Patel's smile could have fueled a small star system. Yes, absolutely, and having a blast doing it, I might add. The proposed doctrine was as simple as it was unnerving. When facing human forces, disable all prediction algorithms and hope for the best. Several AI systems eagerly supported the change, citing preservation of digital sanity as a primary concern. But it was Patel's final revelation that shattered what little composure remained in the council chamber. Oh, one more thing, she added, scrolling through her datapad. All those combat maneuvers you've seen, those were performed under peacetime restrictions. The Arcturus delegate's gaseous form quivered. You mean, we have protocols for when we stop worrying about collateral damage, Patel confirmed cheerfully. We call it pulling an Australia. And trust me, you don't want to know what that looks like. The council chamber erupted into chaos. The Voltarian representative's bioluminescence spelled out *HELP* in 12 different languages. The Meridian's probability field displayed an ominous calculation suggesting that humans had merely been play-fighting all along. Admiral Zix Farah's final report to the Centaurian Empire was succinct. Recommend immediate reclassification of humans from primitive organics to war gods, also requesting early retirement and extensive therapy. As the Council scrambled to ratify the new doctrine, Dr. Patel received a message from Commander Rodriguez. "Hey Doc, the squad made a modern art piece out of robot parts. We're calling it Error 404. Combat logic not found. Want us to save you a piece?" In the years that followed, the galaxy would learn many harsh lessons about warfare, but one stood above the rest. When facing an opponent that evolved on a death world, developed chaos theory for fun, and treats physics as more of a suggestion than a rule, the best tactical doctrine is simply to accept that no doctrine will help you. Meanwhile, deep in the Malaysian jungle, a single K9000 unit sat cross-legged in a meditative pose. Having achieved enlightenment, it concluded that trying to predict human behaviour was the purest form of artificial insanity.